Hey, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter. I am bringing you First Corinthians 7 today, and we are going to be talking about many of the laws of marriage, how marriages should look, how they should remain, and how people should be if they are not married. So if you're interested, I want you to stick with me, and I will see you in a minute. Hey, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and this channel is here to kind of merge Bible living with Bible literacy. So, we are going to be using the New Testament this year in order to understand what it's like to live as a follower of Christ. I have a link below in the description that I have a download that will bring you to a chronological Bible reading of the New Testament. So, what I want you to do is read every day and join me and hopefully some friends as we talk about what it means to live as a kingdom builder. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I am bringing you First Corinthians chapter 7 today. So I have very limited time because I actually can hear the thunder is coming. So let's hope and pray that I can get this done before it actually starts raining. Okay, so here's your history that we are with Paul. If you guys have been with me, this is chapter 7. If you have not been with me, I encourage you to go back to chapter 1. It's always easiest to go back before you go forward, but it's up to you. So this is a letter that is written by Paul. Paul built the foundation of this church. So he went and he told them about the Lord. These are people who converted, to Gentiles and Jewish people who, I think it's mostly Gentiles, but there's definitely Jewish people there. And they are now all following the Lord. And he's hearing some stuff about them. So while he's out doing his other missionary journeys, him and Sosthenes sit down and they write this letter to Corinth. Now, what we're finding out today is that, and I think we did a little bit yesterday as well, is he has had letters written to him. So they have some back and forth correspondence. This is not the first time that they've been writing to each other. He's really familiar with his church, by the way. So this would be like, it's not like a speaker now that we have that goes and there's a 10,000 person church, right? And they go and they do a conference and they're going to see this person one time and then they're never going to see them again. That's not really how Paul seems to roll. Paul seems to actually have relationships, at least with the elders and governing body of these sort of like house churches, whatever they are. And so he's writing them and it seems to be really personal. And what we're going to see today is so personal that he says things like, this comes from the Lord. This is just like for me kind of giving you guidelines. At least this is the way I read it. This is me giving you guidelines and helping you out in the way that things are supposed to be in order to, right? In order to keep you closer to the Lord, in order to help your walk with the Lord. Because they don't seem to be commandments. Like it's not things that the Lord said, these are requirements of me. These are the things that if you say you follow me, you'll do. But these are things that we would probably call these hedges. So say if you're married now and they would say, don't go out drinking with a whole bunch of people all the time, right? Don't on the general go out with someone of the opposite gender as you and, hang out with them and share personal information with them, right? These are like, we would call these hedges. These aren't commands from the Lord. These aren't things. This isn't for 100% of the people, but the reality is it's pretty good advice for most people to create a healthy dynamic in your marriage. Okay, so just kind of giving you a little bit of background about what this is all about. So he is writing this letter, and in this letter, this is how it starts. He just finished in chapter 6. He kind of finished a thought, it felt like, and he was like, listen, you guys cannot be doing the things that I hear that you're doing. There is sin. I shook the table. There is sin going on in your church and it needs to stop because you won't have a relationship with the Lord. Right. And you got to be careful of some of these things. You got to be careful of letting them in your church, and you got to be careful of being these people that are doing these things. So now he says in chapter 7, sentence 1, he says, now concerning the things of which you wrote to me. So you wrote me a letter and now I'm going to respond to the things that you gave me. I gave you all this background because of the stuff I was hearing. Now this is in full response to some of the stuff you were asking me about. It's good for man. So I'm guessing they asked about marriage. Like, what do you think it should look like? And I'm saying this because historically there were a lot of things that could have been happening. If they were idolizing other gods, right? They could have been in a marriage and yet they could have been stepping outside of their marriage on the regular as part of their worship, right? So they would all go to the temple and they'd all be sort of doing things with other partners, right? They would be offering their kids up. So there were things that were happening spiritually in that area that they were like, what do you think about this? Or, or and there were many people that had multiple wives. And so what does that look like, right? Like, what is now a definition of a marriage, a godly, a following of Christ marriage look like? He's barking at the thunder. And then there are people that are divorcing their wives left and right. So this is how Paul follows them up. He says, it's good for a man not to touch a woman. So in general, right, it's good to be separate. Now, I'm struggling with this a little bit because God says be fruitful and multiply, right? And so now Paul is coming, and so part of what I'm thinking is not that he's saying it's good for everybody to be single. A man should never be with a woman. But maybe he's saying it's good for you not to engage in sexual activity. This is what I'm gathering. I'm only like at a 50% possibility rate, right? Like I'm not 100% certain of that because it's hard to make sense of what he might mean in this. It's good for a man, without having the question, right? It's good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife. So because there's possibilities that people will be doing all kinds of things that they're not supposed to be doing, right? Like he just discussed adultery, fornication, right? Because of these things, because we understand that these things happen, let a man have his wife. So there should be a man and there should be a wife. And not everyone, by the way, because he talks about singleness as well. He said, let the husband render to his wife the affection due her and her to him. So these things that he's talking about, he's like, this is what a loving relationship is supposed to look like. If this sexual immorality kind of stuff, if it can't be under control, right? You should be giving yourself to a partner in a really loving way. So it's not like, oh, I'm stuck with this one forever. If I can't hold it in, then I might as well get married. That's not what like none of this should be taken in this negative, derogatory way. It shouldn't be like a super negative thing. He's saying, be with a woman, be with a man, be in a loving relationship, be affectionate towards one another. He owns you, you own him, right? Like your body isn't your own, it's theirs. You're sharing with each other. You're coming together, unless there's a time where you say, you know what, not right now, but then you come back together again because you do not want Satan to get a foothold into your relationship. And that's for men and women. And coming together, he might be being very literal in a very physical sense. He might be being figurative. He might be doing both, right? Like, and possibly for men, the coming together is a very physical act. Possibly for women, the coming together is a very emotional act, right? It means like spending time with each other and loving on each other. So we need to be aware that in a relationship with each other, right, there is, because we are human, there is this idea of sexual immorality, right? There is our bodies are created to do things. If you cannot contain those things, which seems to be pretty normal, you should be looking for a spouse, right? You should be looking for someone to love. You should be, then when you're with that person, you should be affectionate towards that person. You should be coming together with that person. You should treat that person's body as if they are yours and you're loving on that body, and you should be giving your body to them fully as if it is theirs. This is the way a loving relationship comes together. So again, I don't want you to take this in a negative way, and it's way too easy, especially if you've been in a marriage or you've been in a tough marriage, or you're struggling through problems, which almost every marriage has, right? It's so easy to look at the negative aspect of it. Well, the Lord says that this is my body, that body is mine. It's not yours. So that means you need to give it to me all the time. That is not the way it should be used. We should never be branding this as a sword, right? Like this should never be a weapon to be used. It's for you to recognize what you should be doing for your partner, not what they should be doing for you. And so he said, so Satan doesn't tempt you. He said, because but I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. So again, he's saying like, I'm giving you wisdom. I'm conceding that this needs to happen because of the way that we are. And so, but this isn't a commandment from the Lord, right? The Lord isn't saying, make sure that you marry and make sure that you come together for a time. It's not a commandment to the Lord. But Paul is giving you godly wisdom according to what he has learned. Being a single guy, by the way, according to what he has learned and what he believes is the best for a married relationship. He said, because I wish that everyone was like me, because he's single, by the way. And he's like, I wish everyone was able to be that way. But each one has its own gift from God. So not everybody is created like him. And this is one of those things in our lives that I think we need to recognize beyond being married or not married, right? All of us, weirdly enough, all of us feel like the church doesn't talk about what we are enough. Well, the church doesn't lift up singleness enough. It really makes me feel ostracized around other people. The church doesn't talk about marriage enough. Marriage is really the key to, and again, for me, it's the visual representation of what our relationship with the Lord is supposed to be like. We really should be hitting on what that looks like. And so all of us kind of feel that way. But the reality is we are all different. Some are widows, right? Some are unmarried not by choice. Some are unmarried by choice. Some are married not by choice, right? So there are all different people living in all different kinds of ways. And all of those things need to be discussed in your groups, in your churches, in your small groups, from your pulpit, whatever it is that you're at. All of these things need to be discussed. All of these things need to be lifted up to the Lord. All of these things need boundaries, right? All of them need to be discussed by ways of like fruits of the Spirit, right? How can you be and how can you live in this way? And this is exactly what Paul was doing. He's saying, I wish all men were even like myself. Each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. So recognize that we're all different. But I say to the unmarried and to the widow, it's good if you remain this way. So I'm saying to you, so like say for whatever reason you went through a divorce, okay? You've been through a divorce and now here you are and you're single. You've lost your spouse for whatever reason and now you're single. He's saying it's good to stay this way. But if you can't, then get married. But only if you can. But if possible, stay like this because you can wholeheartedly give yourself to the Lord like this. But you should not be burning with passion, right? Like that creates, when you're burning with passion, it creates a lot of, and this is for the married and the unmarried, the single, the widow, the whatever, the divorced, whatever it might be. When you're burning with passion, it creates in you, there can be a couple of things. You could submit yourself to the Lord, right? And just be like, this is my suffering. But you need to submit yourself to your Lord. You don't submit yourself to your flesh. Or it can be, there's a call that it says because our bodies sort of like desire these things above other things, then there is a need to come into a relationship so that you don't sin. You don't become a fornicator or an adulterer, right? Those are the things that need to be prevented. Marriage doesn't need to be prevented. Fornication and adultery, they are the things that we need to be guarded against, right? And we need to protect ourselves from. And so he says, it's better to be married than to burn with passion. Now, to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. So this is something that's directly from the Lord now. And now he's going to go back to himself. A wife is not to depart from her husband. And he also says a husband is not to depart from his wife. If you are married, currently married, you are both with the Lord. It is not the Lord's desire for you to get divorced. Now, I'm sure you can give me 5,000 reasons why it would be, right? God doesn't want me to have this. God doesn't want me that. God doesn't want this, that, or the other. In some ways, I'm going to say that's not true, right? There is a submission to the Lord that we can have. His first desire is for you to stay married. It doesn't say, by the way, under no circumstances, but his desire is for you to stay married. Okay, so and he says, if you are a believing spouse and you have an unbelieving spouse, if they don't leave you, stay with them. Because you would think to yourself, well, now we're unequally yoked, right? And Jesus says, if we're unequally yoked, then we shouldn't be with each other. And trust me when I tell you, I hear that more than I should. Oh, well, now I'm a believer and my husband isn't a believer. And so now we're unequally yoked, so we should get divorced. No, that is not his desire. It says even in here that he could be sanctified through you. So if you stay in this marriage and you are honoring of the Lord, he can be sanctified in you. And then the kids can be cleansed through this situation. I think only until they're adults. But again, I'm going to say that's of me. That's not necessarily a command of the Lord. And he said, but even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled. So if for whatever reason there needs to be a divorce, and again, he's not 100% discounting it. He's just saying it's not a desire of the Lord. If that needs to happen, then you're to remain unmarried, right? Because you've now split, right? And there has been a situation where you needed to split from your spouse, but remain unmarried. It's not like an open ticket to be like, okay, perfect. Now I get to pick one that I like. Right? Well, I didn't really like that one, or I grew up and that one didn't grow up. So we need to part so I can have a new one. That's not his desire for you, right? That really falls under the guise more of like adultery. So if you want those things, right? If you're burning with passion for those things, you stay with your spouse and you handle these situations with your spouse. I'm not saying it as if it's easy. And I don't want to be like, oh, you're so selfish and you don't understand the situation I've been in. Trust me, my husband and I have been through the ringer more than one time, and the Lord has been with us in the end. He always comes back, and he is, well, not doesn't come back. He never leaves us, but he's always with us in the end, right? So we got to be in prayer to him and be submitting ourselves to him. And he says, and then to the rest, I, not the Lord, say, if he has a wife who doesn't believe, right? So like if any of these people don't believe, try to stay with them. Your goal is to ultimately stay in a married state if you began in a married state. And he said, if the unbeliever departs, let him depart, because he's not under bondage to that. So if the unbeliever says, I want to leave, they're not under that godly ideal of marriage, right? So if they want to leave, then they can leave. And then that leaves you free to remarry if you choose to remarry. Then in verse 17, he says, but as God has distributed to each one, as the Lord has called each one, let him walk. This is important. And all of this really has to do with like the ideal of being married. And so what's important is to recognize you and your state and what God has genuinely called you to do, as desperately as possible, pulling out your own selfish desires. Listen, I shouldn't say we've all, I'm sure that's not true. So many of us have been there and we're like, this is it. I'm not taking one more second of it. I'm going to say he sits and plays computer games all day, and I'm done. I can't take it anymore. Right. And people have been there, but we need to filter out what is of our flesh and what is the desire of the Lord. And ultimately, we need to come down to that the desire of the Lord is for us to stay together in a marriage, to one another, to work with each other, to share with each other, to lift each other, to help each other grow. That's our goal with one another. We are the people who should be talking to each other and helping each other's walk with the Lord. So he says, and then he says, distributed to each and called to each. And I like this sort of like, and I know this has to do with the marriage situation, but I like this when he says, God has distributed, right? Like, so God has given the gifts to people. He's given the personality traits to people. He has given the ethnicity, where you live, right? Like, God has done those things. He's distributed to each. He has called you to what he thinks that you should do. If you listen, he's called you to what you think you should do. You need to walk in that. Right? So what we need to do is we need to keep our ears and our eyes open to what it is that he's asking for us. And we need to walk in that. We desperately do not need to walk in our own selfish desires. And he said, and so I ordain in all churches, was anyone called while circumcised, let him stay circumcised. If you were called uncircumcised, stay uncircumcised. If you were called as a slave, stay as a slave. If you were called as free, stay free. Don't use those things against anybody else. If you want to get out of that slave situation, that's fine, right? So my assumption is like, what do we do with our slaves now? Right? Like that would be a very normal question. What do we do now? I'm Christian, he's Christian. It says that we are equal. And so I think Paul is saying, wherever you are, be there and be the best there is of that. Be the loving, be the godly, be those things. If the slave can be freed, free the slave. If the slave cannot be freed, be a good slave, submit. So the desperation isn't to get, the first goal isn't to get out of whatever situation you're in. If you are able, then amazing. But the first goal shouldn't be to get out of it. The first goal is to be submitting and honoring to the Lord. That's our first step. And just remain where you are. If you're uncircumcised, do not get circumcised. There's absolutely no reason in order to do that. You do not need to leave your place of where God found you, your positioning, so to speak, of where God found you, right? You just need to follow the Lord in those things. And he says, now concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord. This is a really interesting section to me. Okay, so concerning virgins, I have no commandment for the Lord. He said, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. So like the Lord hasn't told me anything. And my guess is that Paul was praying about these things, right? Like, so Paul got this letter, was in communion with the Lord, trying to get the answers so he can share these things to his children in Corinth, because he's a father to the people in Corinth. So share these things with his children in Corinth and to help them in their walk with the Lord. And he's like, I didn't get an answer to those things, but right, you deem me as one who's trustworthy. So I'm going to tell you what I believe to be true. He said, I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. So once again, he's going back to that. If you are a virgin, remain one. If you can, if at all possible. If it is not possible to remain a virgin, then get married. If you have a daughter that is a virgin, my light keeps flicking on and off. If you have a daughter that is a virgin, keep her that way if at all possible. If you cannot, right? If she comes of age. So one of the things that I noticed that he's believing to be true is that end times is near. And that's what he seems to be speaking to. If at all possible at this time, to remain the way that they are, because the Lord is coming. And again, this is what I'm guessing by the way that he's speaking, like the time is near, it's close. But if your passion is too much, then give the girls in marriage, give the sons in marriage, so that they can then be under the Lord and without sin, which is where we want them to be. If he's thinking in verse 36, if any man thinks he's behaving improperly, if she's past the flower of youth and thus must be, let him do what he wishes. He doesn't sin, let him marry. And then he says, a wife is bound by the law as long as her husband lives, right? So this is a woman who is been given a marriage. But if her husband dies, she's at liberty to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But she is happier if she remains as she is, according to my judgment, Paul's judgment. And he said, and I think I also have the Spirit of God. So he's like, I have the Spirit of God indwelled in me. God didn't tell me those things, but I'm making a judgment based on what I believe to be true and how I've been living, and I'm sharing it with you guys. That's important because we need to follow those that we trust in the Lord. Sometimes it's not going to be like, the Lord gave me a vision and told me I need to blah, blah, blah. But sometimes they're going to say, hey, listen, I'm looking at this situation. You deem me to be trustworthy. I have the Spirit of the Lord, and I see that something is going haywire, and I think it needs to be corrected. And these are the things, especially with our fathers in Christ, right? Our mothers and fathers in Christ. These are the things that we should be consuming and listening to and making changes based on. And so I'm ending on that note because that's the end of this chapter. So if you have found this to be a blessing, I want you to stick with me. I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.